You're now tuned into the Real Rap Radio Show. I'm your host, Walil Archer on Down to Hot Radio. I'm a special guest with me at Paul Burnore. How are you today?
I am well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So we're going to talk about your book today. Let the listeners know the name of your book.
Okay, my book is called No Flight Plan. And if you know anything about flying planes, you always want to have a flight plan. Know where you're going and let other people know where you're going. But mine is no flight plan, and it's the story of my life. In other words, there was no plan.
Gotcha. How did you come up with that title?
Well, a couple ways, I think. Number one, I'm a pilot and I fly, and I'm used to filing flight plans. And then I was thinking of my memoir, which this is. It's called A Memoir of a Life on the Move. And I was thinking about not knowing your destination is most of my life. Taking some chances, taking some risks, having adventures outside your comfort zone. Never done this before. No flight plan. And then I thought that kind of meshed with the fact that I fly airplanes also.
Now, how long would you say it took you to write the book?
Oh, I know exactly. So the story of writing this book, and I wrote it just last year, came from I've had a lot of adventures in my life, which is this book is about. And people have often asked, why don't you write that stuff down, before you forget it or whatever? And I've heard comments like that for years. Then last December, I was in Africa, in Kenya, and I met a woman who brought me out a book that her father had written about himself, but she got him the gift of this write your own memoir guide on the internet. It guides you along. And he actually did it. And he was a financier traveling around different countries. And all she knew about him was that he was daddy and he came home in the evening. But when she read his book, wow, she really learned what he did, what his preferences were, what his fears were, what his triumphs were that he had never said anything about. She knew her father for the first time. And so I thought about that in conjunction with why don't you write some of this stuff down? And I decided I was going to do that. So I got back from Africa the second week in January. And on third week in January, I sat down and started writing. I finished in
Nice.
September. So
Very
that was
nice.
the motivation. Yes.
Very nice. Now, did you face any challenges with writing this book?
Not a lot. I think the biggest one was how are you going to organize it? And I didn't want it to be just chronological. When I was born, I was very, very young, you know, first grade, second grade thing. I wanted it, since it's a book of adventures, to start with an adventure. So I literally started with coming back from Africa. I mean, that just happened. So it starts, I just returned from Africa. I'm beginning to write my memoir. These are the first three sentences. And I told about my trip to Africa and safaris. And then that sort of reminded me of the safari years before in Tanzania, uh, the Serengeti, Ngorongoro Crater, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And then that reminded me of another adventure. And that's like the introduction. Okay, here's a book of stuff like that. Then I started with my parents and how my parents met. And I provided pictures, photos, their old wedding picture in 1927, for example. And when my sister and I, my twin sister and I, were adopted by them, and our first at birth, and our parents, I call them our parents, they were holding us as little babies, and just had come back from the hospital. So there's a photo of them sitting, holding us our first day in our new home. And then a couple of pictures of, being a kid and adolescent, and so forth. But throughout the book, I decided to occasionally have a photo of people that I met overseas, flying in a Russian helicopter in Kyrgyzstan, um, my Indian classes in India, that is, those kinds of India, etc. So I would just put some of those photos along with the story. So that's kind of how I structured it. And so
Gotcha.
I thought, well, how am I going to remember all this? And what it came down to, Walil, is remembering a given adventure. You start with that, because once you start down that road, remembering, oh yes, I did this and this happened. Oh yeah, now I remember this also. And it is absorbing. And I could write and look up a couple hours later and not realize a couple hours had passed. It's like getting in your own personal time machine. You go back to a certain place and the door opens and one memory leads to another and then to another. And pretty soon you can fill in the blanks and continue with your story that way. So I organized it around all of the places I've lived and traveled and the adventures I had in these various places. And it just seemed to flow that way.
Okay. Now, while writing the book, did you experience writer's block? And if so, how did you overcome it?
I did not experience writer's block exactly. Sometimes you get a little tired of it. You take a day off, but as far as the block goes, no, because I had this little layout. And I thought, okay, here I'm going to talk about my years in Thailand, and here Iran, and here Russia, and here whatever, Kazakhstan, um, India, Haiti, etc. So, so I had the ideas all lined up. And once or twice when I was kind of, I don't know, bored or not going, things weren't going well with a certain section, I just jumped to another one. Say, okay, this memory is vivid, this is clear, and I work on that a while, and then go back to the other one. So I don't remember experiencing any writer's block. Really.
Okay. Now, what do you want the readers to take away from reading the book?
I think one of my messages is write down what you can remember best. Try to validate it or verify, but you won't be able to, because I realized quickly memories are made from your perceptions of what happened. And perceptions aren't very good. If you have 5 people who see an accident in the street, you'll have 5 different versions of it. So your perceptions aren't always accurate. Then the longer they sit in your brain, the more they get embellished. The more you fill in things you can't remember. It's not like you're consciously doing that. I mean, your ego does it for you. You know, you're never the bad guy. You're always, you know, the one who had a good experience, etc. Your ego does that. And some of it is not quite the way it happened, but that is how people naturally remember it. An example is I had an experience or two with my sister when we were kids. She's my twin sister. And when she read it, she said, well, Paul, that isn't exactly the way it happened. I said, well, how did you see it? And she'd tell me. And we were both at the same place, same time, seeing the same incident or whatever. And I said, I just, that's not what I saw. And so I realized that people's perceptions are different. The other example was with my son. He and I climbed many mountains together and so forth. And he questioned one thing. He said, Dad, I don't think it was like this. Wasn't it like this? I said, well, you might be right. You might be right. I'm not totally sure. And I said, I'll rewrite it. I think that's the way it was, but it's not an exercise in history as fact. It's the best your memory can do. And I think we all operate like that. We do the best our memory can do. And I make that admission right up front in the preface. This is all from memory. I don't have any notes. And I tried to verify a number of these incidents with other people. I think it's mainly pretty much accurate. but I don't claim that it's 100%. So that's one thing I think I bring out in the book. Another thing is I think people will walk away um, thinking that it's okay to take a chance and take a risk. Because my mantra throughout my life was, what's the worst that can happen? Let's let's give this a try. It's like the first time you dive off a diving board into the water. The first time it is pretty scary. You're not quite sure if it's going to go right, but once you do it, you feel wonderful about it. And the reason is you've just learned something about yourself and you've learned something about the world. And that's the way I chose to live my life, is a little bit outside the comfort zone, gradually realizing that you can really do a lot of things you didn't think you could do, and a lot of things you didn't think even of doing. So risk taking, taking chances, not standing by the side of the road and watching life go by. One of the quotes I have at the beginning of the book is, the greatest tragedy in life is not regretting what you did. It's regretting what you didn't do when you had the chance. And that's sort of exactly what I'd like to communicate. If you've got a chance to do something, do it. So that's not like climbing a ladder in a corporation. You climb a ladder, there's a path for you. It's a known path. And most careers have certain career steps, and that's a path. And a lot of people like that, and that's fine. And I'm saying if something happens and that tempts you to get off that path, take it. Take it while it's there. You don't know where it's going to lead, and it usually leads to some pretty interesting adventures. It usually leads to you're getting to know yourself better. What you do well at, what you don't like, what you do like, what you never thought you could do well but do. That kind of thing. You know yourself better, I would say, if you do that.
So true. And where can people purchase your book from?
They can purchase it from Amazon, or they can go to my website, which is Ulysses48.com. Ulysses48.com. It's got no flight plan, but it's also got 3 of my books of poetry. This is the first prose book I've published. I've also published 6 books of poetry, 3 of them in the last 10 years. And so those books are also at my website if anyone is interested in poetry. So Ulysses48.com.
Okay. And as we close out, any final thoughts or closing remarks?
Um, the people that have read the book and have given customer reviews or have just told me are just surprised. And the surprise is knowing about someone else's life. They're surprised by the things I did and the places I've been, just like you would be if you discovered your grandfather's letters to your grandmother when he was young. You weren't expecting that. You learn a lot about who they are and about things in their lives that you would never have guessed. I think everybody has a story to tell, and everybody has hidden activities and thoughts and fears and accomplishments that nobody will ever know about unless you write them down, unless you tell someone. So I actually did this not to sell books. I'm not adverse to selling books, but I actually did this as a legacy. And the legacy is because I want my son, my sister, my nephews, my grandchildren to have the same experience as that woman in Africa. And she said, after I read the book, I knew my father for the first time. So this is a legacy. Here's who I really was, not just grandpa who brings a toy Christmas time.
So true. So, Paul, I'd like to thank you for doing the interview today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure. So that's my time today on the Real Rap Radio Show. And I'll see you guys next time on the Real Rap Radio Show with Walil Archer on Down to Hot Radio. Peace and blessings, everyone.